In 1970, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was television's hottest show, and Ruth Buzzi was one of its most beloved stars. What began as a routine sketch ended with a single line that changed everything. Suddenly, the FBI was paying attention, sponsors backed away, and a chilling phone call sent fear through the production. For decades, the incident was brushed aside as rumor or exaggeration. But the consequences were real, and they followed Buzzi long after the laughter faded. What did she say that crossed an invisible line? And why did a comedy show become a liability overnight? This is the untold story behind the laugh-in moment that quietly derailed Ruth Buzzi's career. By 1967, television comedy ran on a familiar rhythm: clear setups, tidy punchlines, and variety shows that moved at a comfortable pace. But George Schlatter and Ed Friendly wanted something that felt alive, something that reflected the restless, chaotic energy of the moment. Drawing inspiration from counterculture gatherings like Love-Ins and Be-Ins, they created Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, a comedy experiment designed to break television's rules. Schlatter called it a sensory assault. The show didn't warm up or slow down. It attacked the screen with joke after joke, delivered in rapid succession. Each episode packed hundreds of quick-hit bits, leaping between slapstick, sharp satire, and surreal visuals. Nothing lingered. One moment delivered a political jab, the next exploded into absurdity. The pace was relentless by design. The influences were broad. Vaudeville and burlesque shaped the humor, while Ernie Kovach's experimental approach fueled its unpredictability. Most important was British satire, especially That Was the Week That Was, which had already shown that television could tackle politics with wit. Schlatter and Friendly took that lesson and pushed it to the extreme. On Laugh-In, sketches often had no clear beginning or end. Punchlines appeared without warning. Scenes shifted before viewers could catch their breath. The chaos wasn't accidental, it mirrored modern life, where everything seemed to happen at once. Some audiences felt overwhelmed, others were instantly hooked. Selling the idea was difficult. Network executives found it risky and too fast. NBC finally agreed to air a single test special on September 9, 1967, expecting little more than a curiosity. Instead, ratings spiked and buzz spread quickly. Within months, the network ordered a full season. From the start, the tone was set by hosts Dan Rowan and Dick Martin, whose rapid-fire banter anchored the madness. Guest stars like Barbara Feldon and Flip Wilson added to the energy. Recurring bits, the cocktail party, Mod World, and the iconic joke wall gave the chaos a recognizable shape. Then came News of the Future, where the show tossed out absurd predictions, some of which astonishingly came true, including Ronald Reagan becoming president. At first, NBC expected Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In to simply fill a time slot, competing with long-running shows like Gunsmoke. Instead, it exploded. By its second season, it was the highest-rated show on television. Its appeal spanned generations. Parents and teenagers watched together, laughing at different layers of the same joke, some for the slapstick, others for the sharp satire. There was always something that hit. At the center were Dan Rowan and Dick Martin, an unlikely duo whose contrast held the chaos together. Rowan was the smooth, controlled, straight man. Martin played the confused goofball. Their chemistry, shaped in nightclubs, translated perfectly to TV. When Laugh-In premiered on January 22, 1968, it felt like nothing else on air. Fast, unpredictable, packed with one-liners and absurdity. By its 8th episode, it was already #1. Their rapid banter gave the show structure, even as it spun wildly around them. Their sign-off, "Say goodnight, Dick," "Good night, Dick," became legendary. The relentless pace and rapid-fire humor changed TV comedy forever, laying the groundwork for shows like Saturday Night Live. Many of Laugh-In's biggest stars were unknown when they joined. Goldie Hawn arrived in 1968 as a bubbly blonde who seemed to giggle through every sketch. The laughter wasn't an act. Producer George Schlatter told her not to rehearse, so her reactions would stay genuine. Audiences responded instantly, and she became a fan favorite almost overnight. Just 2 years later, she won an Academy Award for Cactus Flower and launched a major film career. In 1969, Lily Tomlin joined the cast and stood out immediately, not by telling jokes, but by creating unforgettable characters. One was Ernestine, a nasal-voiced telephone operator who delighted in tormenting callers. Every sketch began the same way. "One ringy-dingy. Is this the party to whom I am speaking?" Another was Edith Ann, a 5-year-old perched in an oversized rocking chair, delivering rambling monologues that always ended with a solemn verdict. And that's the truth. The truth. Lily Tomlin's gift for creating unforgettable characters quickly made her one of Laugh-In's biggest stars. Her success on the show opened the door to a major film career, including roles in movies like 9 to 5, and eventually earned her a reputation as one of the most respected comedians in Hollywood. Henry Gibson stood apart with a completely different approach. While much of the show was loud, fast, and chaotic, Gibson was deliberately restrained. He would step forward, hold up a giant flower, and calmly announce, "A poem by Henry Gibson." What followed were short, deadpan poems, sometimes absurd, sometimes pointed commentaries on current events. His quiet delivery became the perfect counterbalance to the show's manic energy. Beyond Laugh-In, Gibson used his visibility to advocate for environmental awareness, writing poetry and articles about sustainability long before the topic entered the mainstream. His work off-screen reflected the same thoughtful tone he brought to the stage. Joanne Worley, by contrast, was impossible to miss. With her booming voice, extravagant costumes, and theatrical delivery, every appearance felt larger than life. One of her most memorable running gags was her series of anti-chicken jokes, so strange and relentless that they became inseparable from her persona. Arte Johnson and Ruth Buzzi together created some of the show's most iconic moments. Johnson's character Wolfgang, a German soldier who popped out of bushes to declare, "Very interesting, but stupid," became one of Laugh-In's most quoted bits. He also played Tyrone F. Horn, pronounced Horny, a leering old man who spent every episode unsuccessfully flirting with Buzzi's character, Gladys Ormsby. Gladys was grumpy, unfashionable, and permanently irritated, always ready to swing her purse at Tyrone whenever he crossed the line. Each smack sent the audience into hysterics. The joke was simple, but it never lost its impact. Buzzi's performance made her one of the show's biggest stars, earning her 5 Emmy nominations and a Golden Globe. The unpredictability extended to Laugh-In's guest stars. John Wayne once appeared in a bunny suit. Sammy Davis Jr. brought effortless cool. Even Orson Welles joined in. But no appearance stunned audiences more than Richard Nixon's. In 1968, the Republican presidential candidate appeared on national television and attempted comedy. For 6 awkward seconds, Nixon stared into the camera and said, "Sock it to me." His delivery was stiff, his tone uncertain, but somehow it worked. People laughed. That moment came during one of the most turbulent years in American history. The Vietnam War dragged on, protests filled the streets, and the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. And Robert Kennedy left the country shaken. Nixon was attempting a political comeback after losing the presidency in 1960 and the California governor's race in 1962. His biggest obstacle was his image, serious, distant, and out of touch. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was the most popular show on television, especially with younger audiences. It mocked everything, including politics. Some of Nixon's advisors believed appearing on the show was a disastrous idea. Others argued it could humanize him. Paul Keyes, a conservative writer for the show and a Nixon supporter, pushed hardest, convinced that just a few seconds of humor could change how voters saw him. On September 12th, Nixon arrived at NBC's Burbank studios to film his laugh-in cameo, but the process was anything but smooth. Producers wanted him to say a goofy catchphrase like, "You bet your sweet bippy," which Nixon refused outright. He didn't understand the phrase and didn't want to look foolish. After some tense discussion, he agreed to say just 2 words, "Sock it to me." Even then, it took 6 takes before he delivered the line without sounding annoyed. Producer George Schlatter later said he rushed the footage out of the studio, worried Nixon's team might try to stop it from airing. When the episode aired on September 16th, the reaction was instant. Nixon's appearance lasted only 6 seconds, but it stunned viewers. He wasn't charming or funny, he was awkward and stiff, but that made him seem human. At the time, Laugh-In was the highest-rated show on television, so millions saw the moment. Some analysts later argued it helped Nixon reach undecided younger voters. The election was extremely close. Nixon defeated Hubert Humphrey by less than 1% of the popular vote. Humphrey had also been invited to appear on Laugh-In and was offered a simple line, but he turned it down, fearing it would make him look unserious. Nixon took the risk. Humphrey didn't. In a race that tight, that small difference may have mattered. Today, politicians appearing on comedy shows is normal, but in 1968, it was a gamble, and for Nixon, it paid off. In 1969, Laugh-In faced a much darker controversy. Harry Belafonte recorded a segment that never aired. As he performed "Don't Stop the Carnival," footage played behind him showing the violent 1968 Democratic National Convention protests in Chicago. Police beatings, tear gas, and crowds chanting, "The whole world is watching." It was raw and deeply confrontational. NBC refused to broadcast it. Executives feared backlash from advertisers and conservative viewers, judging the segment too risky. The footage had already shocked the nation once, and the network wasn't willing to relive that moment. The segment was cut entirely, never seen by the public. Censorship like this wasn't unusual at the time. In the 1960s, television networks tightly controlled what audiences were allowed to see, steering clear of topics like racism, war, and police violence to avoid upsetting sponsors or viewers. Even Laugh-In, despite its reputation for pushing boundaries, had limits it couldn't cross. Years later, creator George Schlatter admitted that cutting Harry Belafonte's segment was a mistake, one that could have resulted in one of the most powerful moments in television history. Belafonte didn't hide his anger. He publicly called NBC's decision cowardly. Having spent much of his life using his fame to support civil rights, he saw the censorship as proof that networks cared more about comfort than truth. The unaired segment became a lingering what if, a historic moment erased before the public ever had a chance to witness it. At the same time, Laugh-In was still willing to provoke in other ways. In 1969, the show openly mocked Vice President Spiro Agnew, who was known for his dramatic attacks on critics of the Nixon administration. His fondness for alliterative insults, like nattering nabobs of negativism, made him an easy target. The show exaggerated his speaking style into parody, turning him into a cartoonish figure. Agnew and the White House were furious. Reports say his office complained directly to NBC, highlighting the growing tension between politicians and the media. Laugh-In, one of the most watched shows in America, had demonstrated how comedy was becoming a powerful form of political commentary. Agnew tried to rally the silent majority by attacking elites and the press, but his outrage only made him a bigger joke. The more he pushed back, the more comedians leaned in. Another sharp weapon in Laugh-In's arsenal was the Flying Fickle Finger of Fate award. Introduced in 1968, it was given to people or institutions responsible for foolish or harmful actions. The golden pointing finger became a playful but pointed way to call out hypocrisy. Early recipients included President Lyndon B. Johnson, for escalating the Vietnam War and the Pentagon for wasting taxpayer money. By wrapping criticism in humor, the show made serious issues accessible and harder to censor. By 1970, Laugh-In took an even bigger risk with a sketch portraying police officers as pigs, imagery associated with Black Panther Party protests against police brutality. Seeing that symbol on mainstream television was shocking. The FBI took notice. Under J. Edgar Hoover, the Bureau was running COINTELPRO, a secret campaign to undermine radical groups, and any media that appeared sympathetic was viewed as a threat. When Laugh-In aired the sketch, the backlash was immediate. Law enforcement groups accused the show of promoting anti-police sentiment, exposing how deeply divided the country had become. As protests over police brutality grew, some viewers saw the sketch as an honest reflection of the times, while others viewed it as an attack on authority. Proof of comedy's growing power. The show also faced criticism from early LGBTQ+ activists. Dick Martin's drag character, Tiny Alice, relied on exaggerated stereotypes that many found harmful, especially in the wake of the Stonewall riots. Creator George Schlatter argued the show mocked everyone equally, but critics pushed back, noting the difference between satirizing power and targeting marginalized groups. Not all controversy was planned. Arte Johnson's famous line, "Very interesting," was improvised while playing the German soldier Wolfgang. Producers worried it would disrupt the show's pace, but audiences loved it, turning the phrase into one of Laugh-In's most iconic moments. Behind the scenes, success came at a cost. Goldie Hawn became a star at just 22, but the pressure led to anxiety and panic attacks. She left the show in 1970, later winning an Oscar for Cactus Flower and becoming an advocate for mental health. Even small battles mattered. In 1969, NBC objected to the word pregnant, but Schlatter refused to censor it, and won. By 1971, however, the show began to lose momentum. Key stars departed, ratings fell, and Laugh-In ended in 1973. Its influence lived on. Just 2 years later, Saturday Night Live debuted, clearly shaped by the fast pace, satire, and boundary-pushing spirit that Laugh-In introduced, forever changing television comedy.